The morning fog hung thick over the river as I cast my line. The only sound was the gentle rush of the water. My thoughts quiet, peaceful. And then that voice. It sliced through the mist like a rusty saw. I didn't even have to turn around. I knew exactly who it was. "Major Callahan," the voice called out, dripping with authority. "This is now a designated community recreation area, and your exclusive fishing privileges have been revoked. You have 5 minutes to pack up your equipment and vacate the riverbank before I start issuing fines for trespassing." Karen Miller, the self-proclaimed queen of River's Edge Estates, wearing a pastel pink tracksuit like it was a crown, a clipboard clutched to her chest like she was holding court. She had moved into her beige McMansion on the hill 6 months ago, and from the moment she set foot in this neighborhood, she declared it her personal mission to micromanage everyone. And now it seemed she had decided my family's riverbank was her next target. I took my time reeling in my line, slowly, deliberately, the sound of the spool spinning a soft counterpoint to her words. The river, my river, still gurgled softly over the rocks. It was a sound I'd known since I was a boy fishing with my grandfather. Revoked my privileges. That made me chuckle. It was like telling a mountain it couldn't touch the sky. A privilege, huh? You ever dealt with someone from an HOA who thought their laminated rulebook meant more than the Constitution than common sense? Well, hit that subscribe button if you've ever been there. Tell me where you're watching from, or drop a comment sharing your own HOA horror story. It's always good to know you're not alone in the foxhole. But let me tell you how Karen, with her clipboard and her newfound sense of power, tried to seize my family's legacy, how I used her own rulebook, a century of legal precedent, and a bit of military strategy to not just win, but to dismantle her little kingdom piece by bureaucratic piece. The Callahan family settled this stretch of land in 1888. We weren't wealthy, we weren't land barons, we were farmers loggers, just regular people who saw the value in this beautiful stretch of the Whisper Wind River. The original deed kept safe in my father's fireproof vault was clear. It granted my great-great-grandfather Angus Callahan ownership of the land from the old oak on the western rise to the granite marker on the eastern flat, extending to and including both banks of the river and everything in between for half a mile. That meant not just the land next to the river, but the rocks, the mud, the sand, every single inch of the riverbed was ours. A right established long before zoning laws, long before homeowners associations were even a thing. For over a century, my family had been stewards of this land, fishing, keeping it clean, ensuring the banks didn't erode. It was part of who we were. "Flows through it, Jack," he'd say. "His hand flows through it, Jack." He'd say, his hand heavy on my shoulder as we watched an eagle dive for a trout. "That belongs to everyone downstream, but the ground it touches here, that's ours to protect." I spent 25 years in the Army Corps of Engineers. I know my way around a deed, a survey, a boundary line. When I retired, I came back home to the house my grandfather built, expecting a quiet life of fixing fences, tending to the orchard, and spending my mornings here fishing. That was the plan, anyway, until River's Edge Estates came along. About a year ago, developers bought the old Miller farm up on the ridge, tore it up, and put up a bunch of cookie-cutter McMansions. The houses were nice, I suppose, if you like that sort of thing. But the people who bought them, they seemed to think that their new homes gave them the right to take a piece of my heritage. And right at the head of that entitled parade was Karen Miller. I turned slowly to face her, the fishing rod still resting in the grass. "Good morning, Karen," I said, keeping my voice calm level. "Trespassing, you say?" Her chin lifted. "On what grounds?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She puffed herself up and began quoting Bylaw 7.4 subsection C as if she were quoting scripture. Apparently, every inch of the riverbank within River's Edge Estate's boundaries was now a shared amenity open to anyone who wanted to use it. No permanent structures, no exclusive use, and certainly no fishing on the shoreline. I couldn't help but smile. "Is that so?" I said. "And when exactly was this community boundary established?" "At the last board meeting," she declared as if it were self-evident. "Voted on and ratified. It's all perfectly legal. Now, I'm not going to ask you again, Major. Pack it up." Her disdain for my military title was clear. She didn't see me as a veteran. She saw me as an obstacle, one she was determined to eliminate. But I wasn't about to give up an inch of my land, not for her, and certainly not for her petty HOA. This was no longer just about fishing. It was about my home, my family's history, and a deep belief in what's right. The first blow came 3 days later, a notice of violation courtesy of the HOA. It cited bylaw 7.4 and fined me $100 for unauthorized use of the community's recreational space, trespassing on my own land, a fine for fishing. I wasn't just upset. I was amused. It was like receiving an eviction notice from a mouse living in your wall. I laid the notice on the table next to my father's oak creation, then pulled out the HOA's rulebook. I'd read it before a catalog of absurdities approved mailbox colors, lawn maintenance schedules. But I also knew the truth was in their own documents. I flipped to the plat map tucked in the back. There it was. My property marked as Parcel 7B, not a part. It couldn't be more clear. I had their own blueprint to back me up. I set my plan into motion. I reached out to old friends from my time in the Corps, Colonel Marcus Thorne. He owed me a favor, and I needed help to take this fight to the next level. Karen had made a critical mistake. She had overstepped, ignored the very documents that would have proven her wrong. She'd handed me the rope I needed to pull her down. The next phase of my strategy began with reconnaissance. I began speaking to the other residents quietly, carefully. Mrs. Gable had been fined for a bird feeder. The Rodriguez family was being harassed over a swing set. It wasn't just me. This was a pattern of harassment, all from one woman who thought she had the right to rule over us all. And then came the trap. I knew Karen had already crossed the line by trying to build a fence on my land. I sat back, let her make the first move. She called a surveyor to legitimize her fence. I documented everything. When the surveyor arrived, I brought him a cup of coffee. "This is my property," I said, pointing to the fence. "And what Karen Miller is asking you to do is illegal." The surveyor froze. He looked at Karen. He knew the stakes. He walked away from her, leaving her exposed for the fraud she was trying to commit. That was the moment it all came together. The community was no longer just watching from the sidelines. They were with me. The evidence was irrefutable. Karen had been playing the role of a bully for too long, but now the tables were about to turn. At the next HOA meeting, Karen thought she still had the upper hand. But the room was full of people who had had enough. David Chen, one of the board members, stood up and turned the tables. He called for a vote of no confidence in Karen's leadership. The rest of the board, one by one, followed suit. It was over. Karen's empire crumbled. She left the clubhouse, her power gone. The residents who had been too scared to speak up now stood tall, united. And I, for one, couldn't help but feel the weight of history lift from my shoulders. But the story wasn't just about a fight over land or fishing rights. It was about the power of community, about standing up to the bullies who think they can push others around because they've got a little bit of power on paper. So when my grandson Leo asked me if the river was ours, I smiled and told him the truth. The water belongs to everyone, but the land, the banks, that's ours, and it's our job to protect it. And then just like that, he caught his first trout. The legacy was secure. The river was still ours. Now the question remains, how far is too far when someone tries to use power to strip others of what's rightfully theirs? Is it always worth fighting for justice, even if it means going to war? Share your thoughts, your stories. Let's keep the conversation going.